Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, along with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Juan Williams, Eric Bolling, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. America got its first look today at the handover of Sergeant Bo Bergdahl to U.S. forces in Afghanistan. The Taliban released the 17-minute propaganda video. It shows Bergdahl looking healthy after spending 5 years in captivity. Taliban fighters were holding a white flag as they approached the Black Hawk chopper. U.S. forces patted down Bergdahl to make sure he wasn't armed or wearing a suicide vest. The fighters were heard shouting to the Americans, "Don't come back to Afghanistan. Next time, you won't make it out alive." Soldiers who served with Bergdahl say he ended up with the Taliban after he deserted his post. One says they were told not to tell the truth about his disappearance.
We had all known that it was that he had deserted his post, and there was never anything about him getting captured or a POW until a little while later, whenever it came down from the chain of command that we needed to keep quiet about it, not say anything. We're going with the narrative that he was captured.
Wow. So they basically told you not to, not to tell the truth.
Yes, sir.
At least 6 soldiers may have died while searching for Bergdahl. Here are 2 of their mothers reacting to the trade with 5 Gitmo detainees.
I know that with my son, if he was captured and didn't go AWOL, I know for sure that he would not want 5 extremely dangerous terrorists traded for his life. He would give his life.
He's getting the royal treatment. And our kids came home, the ones of us who lost our son, they came home in the baggage part of an airplane and were rolled out in a box.
Joining us now from Washington is a journalist who's been following this story very closely, Fox News contributor Steve Hayes, a senior writer with the Weekly Standard. Steve, there were some developments today. We actually heard something that the Taliban may have said about Bergdahl when he first went into their hands. Do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, there's been some pretty interesting developments. We've heard from Bergdahl's platoon mates, including his platoon leader, that when he left, when he walked off the outpost, he was searching for the Taliban. They heard that in radio communications shortly after he left. And what we had today was a Washington Post article that confirmed with Afghan villagers that when Bergdahl left, he was in fact looking for Taliban strongholds. The villagers told the Washington Post that this struck them as very odd, but you can see why some of Bergdahl's platoon mates thought that he might not just be a deserter, but was potentially a defector or a wannabe collaborator, and it made them very nervous. You could see why they had those concerns.
One of the things you've done, Steve, is talk to the platoon mates. Can you tell us how unusual it is for those other soldiers to be told not to speak about something, or is that a standard practice that the military uses when we have somebody go missing?
Well, I think if they're told not to say anything, that's one thing. I mean, I think it would be expected that they don't want to be giving up any information about the soldier who's missing, about his potential whereabouts, about their efforts to rescue him. That's all, it seems to me, sort of perfunctory. The real question, though, is that they were given non-disclosure agreements. And why were they given non-disclosure agreements? Who ordered them to sign those non-disclosure agreements, if that's in fact what happened? And then the clip that you just played from earlier from Fox and Friends with Josh Fuller saying, in effect, not only were they told not to talk about what they had seen or not to talk about their own conclusions about Bergdahl having walked off the outpost, but to actually say that he was, in fact, a POW who'd been captured, which is, being instructed, in effect, to lie.
We're going to take it around the table now. Kimberly.
Yeah, hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us on the program. I'm looking at that video, and he seems to me to be the picture of health. Doesn't look like he was deteriorating rapidly, so that this was exigent circumstances, that they had to act and violate the 30-day rule for notification to be able to get him back to the United States. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that's a good question. We're going to hear a lot more about his health, about his condition when he was turned over. National Security Council briefer, after he was captured, briefed reporters and said that Bergdahl was, in fact, in good condition. And I think we can see in the video that, at the very least, he wasn't in the kind of dire straits that administration officials had led people to believe when they described his condition as urgent. Remember, the video, the secret video that the Wall Street Journal reported on today, that was taken in December of 2013. That's some 6 months ago. And the reason that the White House gave for this urgent rescue was that they had compared that to a video in 2011 and in effect said he's deteriorating rapidly. Well, that's a hard argument to make when you wait 6 months to do the prisoner exchange.
Eric.
Hey, Steve, if we can just keep rolling that video one more time. Right at the beginning of this video, I'm sure you must have combed this thing a bunch of times. So we have our guys that come over. They greet the Taliban. They actually shake the Taliban's hand. I'm trying to figure out, A, why they did that. Then there's something that important happens. We kind of pat him on the back of Bergdahl. We kind of pat him down a little bit, a brief pat down, but certainly not a search. He's also holding a bag, Steve, that no one searches. They don't look inside that bag. Bergdahl and the other two of our guys get on the helicopter, join the other 3 people on the helicopter, and he's never really been searched. Now, this is a guy who supposedly was just turned over by the people who want to kill us, right? We've been fighting them for the last 12 years. Wouldn't you think, does this not, I don't know, raise some red flags that something more has been going on, more dealings have been going on than what we're being told right now?
Well, it was interesting. You're right. I have looked at this video very carefully, and they did this sort of preemptive search right after they took possession of Bergdahl, and then they did another one before they boarded the plane where they did sort of a more in-depth pat-down. But they didn't search the bag. I think that's very interesting that they didn't actually take the time to search the bag. I would have expected them to have done that. I don't have any explanation as to why they didn't, but they did at least do the initial pat-down and the pat-down of his body, which would have potentially or presumably demonstrated if he had some kind of a suicide bomb attached to his waist.
Gutfeld?
Chris, always great to see you. You look marvelous. I have a comment and I have a question. The comment is about negotiating with the Taliban. Here's what I think we've learned. You do not bring President Obama when you're buying a car, because you're going to come home with a Frisbee with the word car painted on it.
Right.
And he's going to go around and go, look, Michelle, I got a car. I only paid 25 grand for it. He is a terrible negotiator. My question is, these guys are essentially mobsters on mules. It wasn't just 5 traitors or 5 Taliban that they got. There must have been some money involved. Was there stock in Solyndra?
Yeah.
I don't know about stock in Solyndra, but it's very clear that the Taliban in this exchange got what it wanted. I mean, remember, I think it goes beyond just these 5 senior Taliban commanders who I have been told were some of the worst at Guantanamo, the people that we wanted to keep in Guantanamo as long as there were any Americans on the ground in Afghanistan. But remember, we've also seen basically a strategic pause, we've been calling it, in combat operations, counterterrorism operations in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There hasn't been a drone strike in Pakistan since December 25th, and counterterrorism operations have wound down considerably across the border in Afghanistan. Was that a confidence-building measure? You've seen from the administration, including in the president's speech just last week, where he announced that we were going down to the 0 option after 2016. You've seen the administration, in effect, meet several of the goals, several of the demands that the Taliban had when these negotiations first started in November 2010. I think the president, at the very least, hasn't been a very good negotiator.
Now your fellow co-panelist from Special Report in a very different role, getting to ask you a question. Juan Williams.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Juan.
You know what I noticed was that for all of the soldiers who were in that platoon and have raised questions about Bergdahl's conduct, I don't hear this kind of blowback coming from the Pentagon, the CIA. Those folks, in fact, I saw that General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, took to social media to say this was our last best chance to rescue him and that his conduct is a separate issue. Then you had the Washington Post report saying this question about whether or not soldiers were injured or died trying to rescue Bergdahl is murky at best. So what are you hearing from Pentagon, CIA, high-level sources who might have a different view than the soldiers who are on the ground?
Well, I mean, remember, the high-level folks at the Pentagon and the CIA have to answer the President of the United States. And what we've seen is the President, in this instance, it's been reported by Time Magazine and others, skipped the normal process for determining whether it was safe or prudent to release or transfer Guantanamo Bay detainees. There had been an entire system set up where the President inserted his own people. They made separate evaluations using the intelligence that was drawn from the inmates down at Guantanamo over the past several years. They renew these interrogations. They renew these assessments every single year. The president's own team had decided against the release or transfer of many of these folks, many of the folks who are still there. And the president, in effect, jumped over them and said, I'm taking your advice, setting it to the side, and making my own determination on this.
Steve, I have a question. So we know that in the past several years, including as early as last year, the intel community and the Pentagon said that they were not comfortable with these 5 terrorists being released. The White House then is reported to say that they went through the proper process and that everybody was on board at the end. Do we know what changed, or if there was an assurance from Qatar that we now believe? Like, is there a moment, or was it basically like in Time magazine, where you have a administration official on background saying it was time to tell the military to suck it up and salute? That's their quote, not mine.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly had some attempts by administration officials to sort of backfill, to explain why they felt the need to do this. And a lot of that goes back to the original question, which was Sergeant Bergdahl's health. Was he, in fact, in such poor health, really on the verge of potentially not making it out of Afghanistan if the United States didn't intervene, and didn't intervene right away? And you've heard from Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and others that that was the thing that was the real tipping point, along with these supposed security assurances that we had gotten from the government in Qatar. Now, the problem with those, I mean, there are a couple of problems with them. One, we've seen that basically those assurances have already been violated, and you have these folks traveling freely throughout the country and, in effect, free after 1 year to go back to Afghanistan and re-engage in hostilities. But they can do a lot of work on behalf of jihad, the sort of broader jihad, from Qatar if they don't have any restrictions on them, and it appears that they don't.
Eric?
Steve, okay, so 1 week ago, Susan Rice did an interview where she said regarding Obama's legacy, this is before the Bergdahl stuff broke, regarding Obama's legacy, we're looking to put points on the board, and I'm using her term, okay? This Bergdahl stuff breaks Saturday night into Sunday, and on Sunday, Susan Rice says to CNN the reason why they took Bergdahl when they did, because there was acute urgency about his health. That afternoon, or that same morning, sometime midday or so, she tells ABC that Bergdahl was in good condition, good health condition. The same day, she says acute urgency and good health. Are we going to hold this administration to these? I mean, she is blatantly lying. Either he was in good health and they didn't need to do it, or he was in acute urgency and he needed to be taken now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we are going to see a ton of scrutiny placed on the claims that the administration made about the need for the urgency. You've had contradictions all over the place, not just with Susan Rice, but as I mentioned, on the day of the extraction, a couple hours after Sergeant Bergdahl was lifted off the ground in that chopper, you had administration officials telling reporters that he was in good condition. Well, that contradicts what Susan Rice said the next day. It contradicts what the administration has been saying ever since. It contradicts what they told Congress as an excuse for not giving them this 30-day notification. It contradicts this huge front-page story on the Wall Street Journal today in which administration officials made it sound like Sergeant Bergdahl was not going to survive if we didn't do this and do it right now. But again, another important detail in that is that the video that they used to make that determination was filmed in December. So some 6 months ago, and they are just now saying, in effect, we had to go in today. It's unclear if they had, an update, if they had new information or new video. We certainly haven't been told that they had that.
Yeah, and that's what I was just thinking, that maybe the Taliban gave them some sort of indication that they needed to make that deal now, and maybe they lied to us and we fell for it. But I guess we can all be glad that he's home. Greg?
Yeah, comment, then question.
Okay.
I believe the poor health angle was played to stress urgency to cover up the politics of this whole thing. This was done in order to help with an election. Raises the question, though, who's being suckered? Did the Taliban sucker the United States, or did the White House sucker the United States? My conclusion is both. My question is, why these specific 5 Taliban? Were they some kind of boy band called the Gitmos? Was there a reason why those guys had to go and nobody else?
I don't think it has anything to do with their musical abilities. These were senior Taliban commanders. These were the ones that the Taliban had been asking for years. They are the tops. They commanded thousands of people. They were responsible for relations with al-Qaeda, attacks on American soldiers, relations with Iran. These guys are a big deal.
Steve, I have one last question, and they're going to kick us out of here. Last Monday, when President Obama gave the speech at West Point, he met with the former head of Qatar, the former emir, and apparently they met before or around the time that the president gives a speech then to the cadets and lays out his foreign policy. Do you have any information on that?
I don't. I just know that they met at a time when obviously we were having very sensitive discussions with the Qatari government, with his successor. It certainly suggests that this was in the works. Some kind of a deal was in the works long before this announcement on Saturday. And
when they told Congress. All right. Thank you, Steve, very much. Ahead, many of Bergdahl's fellow soldiers say that he deserted, but the State Department thinks it knows better about what happened on the front lines, and both sides of that story next on The Five.